Shabbat Shalom, friends, and Chodesh Tov. Iyar, the new Hebrew month that began Thursday evening, and the celebration of which continues today, is considered the month of healing. Iyar is the only month on the Hebrew calendar who has for its entirety the experience of counting the Omer. And though counting the Omer is considered actually a period of semi-mourning, nonetheless, Iyar is considered an exalted month because in its entirety, we are counting the days of the Omer, that special time between Passover and Shavuot. So it is already a unique month. It is the second month on the calendar if you begin starting the counting at Nisan, the month of Passover, which most calendars do, or it could be considered the 8th month. Some people consider the month of Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the new Hebrew year, as the start of the year. So in that and so many other things, we are in a little bit of disagreement, although most Jews count Nisan as month number 1, so Iyar is month number 2. But as such, it can maybe be a little overlooked because it isn't the month of Passover. But one of the particular aspects of it is that it is associated with wellness and healing. Why? Well, there are a number of explanations, but one that is particularly touching is that some rabbis long ago noticed that the spelling of the month of Iyar, and even we disagree on the spelling of the month of Iyar, but the traditional spelling, Aleph Yud Resh, can be read as an acronym for Ani Adonai Rofecha, from the book of Exodus. I am the Eternal One, your healer. To this day in modern Hebrew, Rofeh is the word for doctor or healer. So looking at the letters that spell Iyar, Aleph, Yud, Resh, we see therein a message of divine healing. Some have also suggested that after the rigors and excitement of Passover, we moderns who like to put out, if we're blessed to do so, a beautiful spread for Passover and work so hard to make Pesach special, we need a month of recuperation after Passover. It's also been suggested that after the Exodus, after the traumatic experience of leaving Egypt, the Israelites needed to be healed. They needed to bind their wounds, physical and psychological, after the experience of bondage and the night of terrors and following the plagues that the Israelites, though by the Torah account were not directly affected by physically, certainly they must have been emotionally affected. So in that time of post-trauma, there was needed a time of respite, a time for recuperation and recovery. So if this month of Iyar you have an occasion or feel the need to do a little extra self-care, then please know that the tradition gives you full permission to do so. Side note, because Iyar is sometimes spelled Aleph Yud Yud Resh, as it was in our graphic for this week's Constant Contact, and there's not widespread agreement as to how Iyar should be spelled, official documents that are written in the month of Iyar often are done twice. Official Jewish documents, they will have one with one spelling and one with another spelling, so that should those documents be needed in the future, there's no discrepancy. You can produce one spelled according to one tradition, one spelled according to the other tradition, and make everybody happy. Wouldn't that be wonderful if we could accomplish that? So in this month of Iyar, we typically hear from the chapters, the portions known as Tazria and Metzora. And these are chapters that deal with maladies. Very debatable as to whether childbirth should be considered a malady, but inasmuch as it was, and unfortunately still is, too often a near death or even a fatal experience, successful childbirth certainly was considered as though one had recovered from an ailment, and anyone who has given birth knows that there is definitely needed a time for recuperation and recovery. So we still debate some of the prescriptions, certainly in the ancient lore, but this is a parsha, a Shabbat of healing and of seeing those who are hurting, who are ailing, when it might be our tendency to turn away. And that's understandable as well. I shall apologize for my doggy. In the Talmud, in Masechet Sanhedrin, 98a, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi sees Eliyahu, sees Elijah the prophet, and he asks him, Elijah, when will the Messiah come? And Elijah responds that Yehoshua ben Levi will be able to find the Messiah by the gates of the city. How will we recognize the Messiah? We will know him or her because the Messiah will be changing the bandages of those who are suffering from leprosy. The Messiah will be a healer. The Messiah will be a person that sees, and the word see appears multiple times in Parshat Tazria. The Messiah will be a person who doesn't turn away from those who are hurting, but goes out of his way to heal the suffering. Friends, people in our world who exacerbate the suffering of others are not ushering in the time of the Messiah. This week is Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel's 75th birthday. And it should be such a cause for celebration. And we know, if we are honest, that there are those in the world who will never celebrate Israel, no matter how many years she is here on the earth, and no matter how tiny her territory or how few Jewish people would be living in that part of our world, there are those who will never allow her and we as Jewish people to exist in peace. That is a terrible reality. And there are those who, to counter that, have decided that no concessions should be made. Very little patience or compassion should be extended to people who feel that way. And that's maybe an understandable position. But Parshat Tazria and Metzora and the celebration of Yom HaAtzmaut cannot be done justice to unless we do as the Parsha invites us to do, to see those who are suffering and to do everything we can to bring healing. But we need to be honest. I have friends who are such staunch, lifelong supporters of Israel who would do anything to ensure her safety. And yet they are too sounding the alarm at some of the blindness that is coming out of members of the government and of some of the religious leaders of Israel. It's painful to look at and it breaks my heart, but we have no choice. We need to look. We need to be aware. We need to look at the real Israel and the reality of the people who live and govern there, not as a fantasy of a perfect place that embodies our greatest aspirations for Judaism. We can't turn away from or ignore the political, religious, and social realities that are plaguing the state of Israel in order to know the country and ultimately help it to heal and prosper. We have to see it for everything that it is, scabs and all. That's what the Parshas compel us to do, to look at the difficulties of the things that plague this society and do what we can to find some kind of common ground. Yes, continue to make painful concessions to so many who might wish the United States and Israel and the Jewish people ill. I know it hurts, but the intractability and the rigidity will get us nowhere except to a most painful and sore and even fatal place. I want so much for us to celebrate. All of the Jewish people want nothing more. 75 years of a state of Israel is a miracle, and not for nothing. And I am thankful. I don't use their material that much, but the organization called Trua, which describes itself as a rabbinic call for human rights, has compiled some wonderful materials for celebrating Israel at 75. And one of the mentions of 75 that I thought was particularly touching was that they note that in the book of Genesis, chapter 12, Abram went forth as the Eternal had commanded him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he began his new journey. Abraham was a fully formed adult when he heard God's command to Lech Lecha, go forth and begin a new chapter. It's a comforting thought that life can begin anew. At age 75, the Torah is not afraid of giving new options to people who have lived many years. May Israel at age 75 begin a new chapter of peace and goodness. May we continue to try to be a light unto the nations, and may that light be one of justice. I'm going to conclude this section of our service today with a prayer that North American Jews can say on the 75th anniversary of Israel's founding, and maybe Jews everywhere can offer up this prayer. It is by Rabbi Ayelet Cohen, and it is particularly beautifully written. Let's say Amen at the end together. Source of life, maker of wonders, bless the state of Israel and all the inhabitants of the land. Protect her with infinite compassion. Spread over her your shelter of peace. Strengthen the hearts and the will of its citizens, calling out for justice and democracy. May their voices ring out like a shofar throughout the land, a budding redemption. Help them replant what has been uprooted and tend what has been neglected, so the seedling promises of refuge and equality blossom and thrive. May their feet not give way. Let them not tire, nor slumber, nor succumb to fear. Grant strength and courage. Nurture a shared future for all who call the land home. Healer of the brokenhearted, sustain our hope. Help us celebrate what was and is miraculous in Israel's founding. Help us grieve all that has been lost in the realization of that dream. May we be strong enough and honest enough to carry the shattered pieces along with the whole. May our love and our commitment to the vision of the prophets endure like honey from the rock. May we be partners with the divine and with all the inhabitants of the land in establishing and protecting justice, peace, and joy. Please offer. Amen.